Jason Whittaker dropped the words like stones. "I've fallen in love with someone else." But Monica Reed didn't flinch. The kitchen was still warm with the scent of morning coffee, but the silence that followed his confession was glacial. It wrapped around Monica like a shawl of ice, but her spine remained straight, her expression unreadable. The same kitchen where they had danced barefoot on rainy Sunday mornings now bore witness to a funeral, the death of a marriage. Jason sat across from her shoulders, stiff in a tailored suit, eyes darting to the side like a child caught lying. His voice was rehearsed, too polished. "Her name's Tiffany. She's younger. She lights things up, makes me feel alive." He chuckled nervously, but it died quickly in the stale air. Monica said nothing. At 35, Monica Reed was a woman of quiet elegance, deep brown skin glowing in the late spring light. Her natural curls pinned into a neat updo that added to her grace. She had built a life around steadiness, her consultancy, her home in Queen Anne, her marriage. But steadiness, she now realized, could also be a trap. Why, she asked finally, not in anguish, but as if she were asking about the weather. The words sat flat on the oak table between them. Jason shifted uncomfortably. "It's not that I don't care about you, I do. But Tiffany's different. Her family's connected. She understands where I'm going. You feel like where I've been." It wasn't a knife, it was a hammer, blunt and final. Monica's hands wrapped around her coffee mug, its warmth grounding her. The urge to cry, to shout, to smash the ceramic against the wall, none of it came. Instead, there was a clarity, a cold, clean stillness that told her she was finished holding space for someone who saw her as a stepping stone. "If this is what you want," she said, voice steady, "then go." Jason blinked, taken aback. He had braced for pleading for tears, for her to confirm the story he'd written in his head, the weeping wife left behind. But Monica Reed, a black woman who had weathered much worse than an unfaithful man, simply stood and walked to the window. The sun filtered through the glass, casting long amber lines across her skin. "I'll pack what's mine," she said. Jason muttered a hollow apology, but she didn't turn around. "Don't be," she said softly. "Just be sure." She moved with a deliberateness that made him look smaller by comparison. When the front door clicked shut behind him, Monica stood alone in the silence he left behind. No tears, no breaking. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the slow rise of a quiet fire in her chest. Not anger, but resolve. She pulled a navy suitcase from the hall closet, unfolded it on their bed. Know her bed now, and began to pack. Not everything, just essentials. The white blouse she loved. Her notebooks, a scarf from Morocco her late mother once gave her. She left the photo albums, the wedding china, the expensive coffee machine Jason insisted on, but never learned to use. That life didn't fit anymore. In the mirror above her dresser, Monica met her own gaze. Her eyes, the deep brown of rich soil, did not blink. She was the daughter of a teacher who raised her alone, a woman who had earned her way through college with scholarships and night shifts, a woman of color who'd been underestimated in boardrooms, ignored in meetings, and smiled through it all while building something from scratch. And now she would build again. The air outside carried the soft dampness of Seattle in May. A faint drizzle hung in the breeze, not quite rain, but a promise of it. Monica wheeled her suitcase to the sidewalk and hailed a rideshare. The car, a Navy hybrid with a dangling pine-scented tree, pulled up within minutes. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, greeted her with a polite nod. "Where to?" she asked. Monica hesitated only a moment before replying, "Capitol Hill." She didn't say it out loud, but in her mind she added, "Somewhere new. Somewhere mine." As the car pulled away, Monica glanced once at the house receding behind her. Not with longing, but with a strange peace. She'd spent years learning how to shrink herself to keep a man comfortable. She was done with that. Let the Tiffany's of the world have men like Jason. Monica Reed Black, brilliant and unbreakable, was free. Monica stood on the front step, suitcase beside her. "Let's see what you've really set free," she murmured to no one. Capitol Hill smelled like espresso and independence. The neighborhood pulsed with life, streets humming with the whir of bikes, baristas shouting names over steamed milk, and murals splashed across red brick walls. Monica Reed stepped out of the rideshare, her single navy suitcase trailing behind her like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. The early June morning was cool, the drizzle light the city exactly as she needed it to be, unfamiliar, alive, and utterly hers. The apartment was small, but sunlit, with creaky wooden floors and windows that faced a bustling alley of cafes and galleries. It wasn't the three-bedroom house in Queen Anne she'd left behind, but it didn't need to be. Monica breathed in the scent of lavender from the starter candle left on the kitchen counter by her new landlord, and whispered a quiet thank you into the empty space. She unpacked in silence, moving deliberately. Every object had to earn its place. She placed a framed photo of her mother on the windowsill, her favorite Baldwin novel beside her bed, and a sticky note above the mirror, "Keep rising." The closet wasn't large, but her wardrobe had been pruned down to essentials anyway. What she lacked in space, she made up for in clarity. That first week, Monica built a rhythm. Mornings began with yoga at a small studio 2 blocks away, run by a sharp-eyed black woman named Tara Blake. On her first day, Tara greeted her with a firm handshake and an assessing nod. "First class?" she asked. Monica nodded. "You carry tension like it's armor," Tara observed, then gestured to the mat. "Let's start undoing it." In class, Monica stretched in silence while lavender oil filled the room. She moved slowly through each posture, her breath tight at first, but loosening with time. Tara didn't push, didn't pry. She simply offered space. It was the first place Monica allowed her shoulders to truly drop. After yoga, she'd pass by Little Oddfellows, a cozy cafe tucked inside a bookstore. She ordered black coffee with oat milk and left a $2 tip always. The baristas soon remembered her name. "Morning Ms. Reed," one of them chirped, placing a warm croissant beside her cup. Monica smiled back, still not used to the sound of her name standing alone again, no misses attached. Evenings were for learning. She enrolled in a beginner's French class at Seattle Central College, held in a classroom that smelled of whiteboard markers and rain-soaked backpacks. Her instructor, Ms. Carla Jennings, was in her 50s, with a French accent that rolled like jazz and eyes that sparkled behind wireframe glasses. "Language is freedom," she said on the first day. "It gives you new ways to name yourself." Monica scribbled that in the corner of her notebook, underlined it twice. She was older than most of the students, more focused. She practiced diligently, whispering conjugations on the walk home, writing phrases on index cards taped to the refrigerator. One night, she paused at a simple sentence. "Je suis suffisante." I am enough. She wrote it again slowly, then copied it onto a sticky note and pressed it to the mirror beside "Keep rising." That phrase became her quiet anthem. Days turned into weeks. Monica's life no longer revolved around someone else's schedule. She spent Sunday afternoons at the farmer's market, asking about leeks and learning the names of cheese. She rediscovered her love for reading, curling up by the apartment window with tea and a Baldwin novel, as the city pulsed below. She found a book club flyer posted at the cafe, "Women Who Read Loudly," and tucked it into her bag. Maybe not yet, she thought, but someday. One rainy Thursday after yoga, Tara approached her as she rolled up her mat. You've got a stillness to you, she said. Not quiet. Still like someone holding steady in a storm. Monica paused. I've had enough storms. Tara nodded. Maybe. But still waters make the best mirrors. That night, Monica journaled late into the evening. Her handwriting grew messier across the page, but her thoughts were crisp. I am not the woman Jason left. I am the woman I chose to stay with. She lit a candle, French jazz playing low in the background, and let herself feel just for a moment the ache beneath the strength. Then she closed the journal and whispered, "Thank you for surviving." On her fridge maps began to appear Provence, Florence, Marrakesh. Circles drawn around cities she had never been to, but dreamed of walking through with no one but herself and a language she was still learning. Her passport lay waiting in the drawer ready. Her life, it seemed, was finally hers to shape. On the way home from class the next day, she passed a gallery featuring local artists. A painting in the window caught her eye. Two figures dancing beneath an open sky, brushstrokes wild with movement. She stopped, watched, and whispered the words that had begun to feel true, "Je suis suffisante." The wind tugged gently at her coat. The streetlight flickered. Monica turned and walked home, shoulders relaxed, back straight, her whole body beginning to believe. She circled the phrase again in her workbook that night and tucked a new, sticky note beside her mirror. Je suis suffisante. I am enough. She wrote it on a sticky note and placed it on her mirror. The lights at the Clean Energy Future Summit glinted off the glass walls of Seattle Convention Center, turning the entire atrium into a prism of possibility. Monica Reed stood near the edge of the stage, fingers resting on the sleek podium, her breath slow and measured. The microphone crackled slightly as she adjusted it, the crowd quieting in anticipation. Rows of tech CEOs, policy advisors, community leaders, and venture capitalists filled the auditorium. Somewhere in the front row sat Derek Langston, billionaire founder of Equigen, a renewable energy giant, with a mission to serve underrepresented communities. He leaned forward slightly, brow furrowed, not in skepticism, but in focus. Monica scanned the crowd once before she spoke. We talk about clean energy as a race, she began, her voice calm, melodic, steady. But no one wins if whole neighborhoods are left without a finish line. A ripple moved through the audience, a few heads nodding. She clicked to the first slide, an aerial image of a South Seattle block that had suffered years of neglect, brownouts, grid instability, abandoned lots. We must build sustainability not just in output, she continued, but in equity. At 35, Monica wore her confidence like a tailored coat. Her deep brown skin caught the overhead lights like polished mahogany, her navy blazer crisp. Her curls swept up with purpose. She spoke without bravado, only clarity. She didn't gesture theatrically or pitch her voice for effect. She let the strength of her ideas do the work. Derek Langston watched, but not just the slides. He studied her cadence, the intentional pauses between facts, the way she built an argument like a bridge anchored, load-bearing, purposeful. Something about her felt familiar. Not her face, but the way she spoke with urgency, tethered to vision. Not performative. Present. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Monica nodded once, a quiet thank you, and stepped off the stage. Her heart was still steady. No nerves. Not anymore. She moved toward the refreshment table where fruit skewers and herbal iced teas sat beside compostable cups. She took one, breathed in, and exhaled into the space she'd just claimed. Remarkable, said a voice behind her. She turned. Derek stood with a glass of iced tea in his hand, his frame, tall shoulders relaxed. His deep brown skin gleamed under the ambient light, and his voice carried that rare balance between strength and ease like a cello played by someone who understood silence just as well as sound. Monica met his gaze without hesitation. "Thank you," she replied. Her tone was even, her posture relaxed but alert. He extended a hand. "Derek Langston." "I know," she said, shaking it. "Monica Reed." He smiled at that. "Your approach to community engagement, it's not just strategic. It's human." She tilted her head slightly. "Most people focus on the numbers. You noticed the why." "Numbers are easy," he replied, his tone still light. "Purpose is rare." They stood there a moment, the buzz of conversation around them softening. Monica took a sip of her tea, letting the hibiscus linger on her tongue. She wasn't surprised by the recognition, nor was she flattered. What struck her was the way he spoke, as though her ideas weren't an anomaly, but expected. "What inspired you to start Equigen?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "A blackout," he said. "Harlem, 2003. My grandmother's respirator shut down. It took us 4 hours to get her to a hospital. She survived, but I couldn't forget the sound of her breath before that. Systems failing people who look like us. That's what started it." Monica nodded, the air between them, charged not with romance, but something rarer, shared purpose. They talked for 20 minutes about decentralized energy grids, about trust in marginalized communities, about what it meant to build legacy without exploitation. Their voices grew quieter as the room grew louder. At one point, Monica laughed, just a small, genuine sound, when Derek admitted he still struggled to program his smart thermostat. "I build smart cities," he said, "but my apartment thinks I'm a guest." She laughed again, and this time it surprised her. It wasn't performance, it wasn't strategy, it was ease, and it had been a while. They eventually drifted toward a quiet corner of the hall near a table covered in biodegradable conference swag and polished brochures. Monica adjusted her blazer as she prepared to leave. "I should get going," she said. "I promised myself no more than 2 hours of mingling," Fair Derek replied. "But before you go..." She looked at him. "I'd like to hear more. Not just about your ideas, about you." She paused, unsure whether to interpret the invitation as personal or professional. But there was no pressure in his tone, no edge. Just curiosity. "I'm around," she said, non-committal but not dismissive. He nodded, not pushing further. As she walked away, Derek stood still, his eyes following her. There was something in the way she moved, intentional, grounded, untouchable. He murmured to himself, "Where have I seen her before?" Monica didn't look back. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor as she left the summit and stepped into the late afternoon sun. The city bustled as if nothing had happened, but inside her something had stirred. That night at home in Capitol Hill, Monica sat by her window with a book in her lap. The phrase still echoed in her mind, "Where have I seen her before?" She wasn't sure what it meant, maybe nothing, maybe everything. She flipped open her laptop, thoughtlessly opened the long-forgotten folder where she once stored pieces of herself she never shared publicly. One document blinked open, on building without belonging. An old blog entry, anonymous, passionate, written years ago. She read the first lines and felt a chill. The systems aren't broken. They were built that way. And then another phrase, "build where you are not invited." Monica leaned back in her chair, blinking. Those were her words. And earlier today, she'd heard something almost identical from Derek. As she closed her laptop, she didn't feel exposed. She felt seen. Not because he knew it was clear he didn't, but because something she had once poured into the world had reached him. Without her name. Without her face. Just her truth. And that somehow made it all feel more real. Seattle's night air carried jazz from a rooftop bar as Monica Reed found herself laughing with Derek Langston of all people. The unexpectedness of it struck her mid-laugh, and for a split second, She caught her reflection in a gallery window, head tilted, eyes alive, curls free from their usual restraint. It had been a long time since she had seen herself like this. The Pioneer Square Art Walk was in full swing. String lights zigzagged overhead between brick buildings, casting soft, golden glows over the sidewalk. Food trucks lined the curbs, offering fusion tacos and saffron popcorn, while artists displayed vivid canvases, wire sculptures, and hand-bound poetry chapbooks. Children danced to the rhythm of a busking saxophonist, and Monica stood at the edge of it all, sipping a paper cup of ginger chai she'd just bought from a truck, painted like a Van Gogh sky. She hadn't expected to run into Derek here. She'd come alone as she often did since moving to Capitol Hill, drawn by the colors and the freedom of not having to be anywhere for anyone else. He had been leaning casually against a gallery doorway, wearing a gray wool coat over a navy turtleneck. He looked entirely at ease, as though this chaotic creative swirl belonged to him just as much as to the street artists. Monica, he'd said, his smile easy but surprised. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," she replied. "You don't seem like the wandering without a schedule type." He lifted his coffee cup in mock defense. "Guilty as charged. I needed a night where no one asked me for a deliverable." They began walking together without deciding to. It felt natural, like picking up a melody mid-song. The conversation moved from street art to jazz, from gentrification to the best croissant in the city. "Not where you'd expect," she told him, a laundromat cafe on East Pine, somewhere between a Haitian metalwork installation and a booth of scented soy candles. They found themselves laughing about an especially bad investor meeting he'd once had with a man who kept calling solar panels sunshields. They paused at a corner where a mural of a black ballerina stretched across an entire alley wall. Monica stared at it, breath caught. "You ever feel like you're reclaiming pieces of yourself," she said softly, "that you didn't know you'd given away?" Derek looked at her, really looked. "Every day," he said. "But I think some pieces never left. We just forget how to speak their language." They kept walking until they reached a rooftop lounge above a converted warehouse. He offered to buy her a drink. She ordered sparkling water with lime, and he ordered the same. The rooftop buzzed with soft music, ambient conversation, and the occasional clink of ice in glass. From where they sat, they could see the shimmering stretch of Puget Sound ferries moving slowly like luminous beetles across the black water. "I've been thinking about your talk at the summit," Derek said. "About how equity isn't just about access, it's about dignity." That stayed with me. Monica looked out at the water, letting the words land. "It wasn't just a talk," she said. "It's lived experience." "I could tell," he said. "You speak like someone who's had to build while being told not to. Reminds me of a piece I read a few years ago. Changed how I approached everything. It said, 'The systems aren't broken. They were built that way.'" Monica's hand froze around her glass. Derek didn't notice. "I printed that essay and taped it to my office wall. Never knew who wrote it, but it hit me in the gut." Monica's heartbeat quickened, but her face stayed composed. "Sounds like something I might have read too." "Maybe," he said, his smile tilted with thought. "If I ever meet the author, I owe them a drink." She smiled faintly, but her mind was already elsewhere. That phrase, word for word, was hers. She had written it under a pseudonym and posted it on a long-forgotten blog 3 years ago. She'd poured her anger and hope into those words, unsure if anyone would read them, certain no one would care. But Derek had. They sat in a companionable quiet after that. Monica watched the city lights flicker in the distance, each window a tiny life, a tiny story unfolding. She felt herself exhale, not just physically, but emotionally, like letting out a breath held for too many years. Eventually, Derek glanced at his watch and stood. "It's late," he said. "May I walk you home?" She hesitated. "I live nearby. You don't have to." "I don't," he replied. "But I'd like to." There was no pressure in his voice, only warmth, respect. Monica nodded and they walked the few blocks in silence. At her building's front steps, he stopped. "Thank you for tonight," he said. She nodded again. "Me too." They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't make promises. It was enough. Upstairs, Monica changed into an old t-shirt and sat on her couch, legs tucked under her laptop balanced on her knees. She typed in the blog's name, surprised it still existed. The dusty corner of the internet where she had once whispered her truth still held her words. She opened the post. "The systems aren't broken, they were built that way." Her name wasn't on it, but he'd remembered every line. She leaned back, staring at the screen. There was a strange comfort in knowing that something she had once given anonymously had landed in someone's heart, even someone as visible as Derek Langston. Maybe even more so because it had landed without a face attached, because it meant the words had been enough. She read the post again. Then she whispered to no one in particular. "Maybe I am too." Rain spattered softly against the tall windows of the seminar hall in downtown Seattle, as Monica Reed stood before the podium, palms steady against the smooth wood eyes focused on the rows of chairs slowly filling. The Community Leadership and Innovation Forum was in full swing, and she was about to deliver the keynote address, one she had nearly declined. But now, as a Black woman with a background in both community development and lived resistance, she realized this moment was no longer just about her voice. It was about every voice that had ever been silenced under the weight of expectation and stereotype. In the crowd, Derek Langston entered quietly and took a seat near the back. Their chance encounter 2 weeks earlier during the Pioneer Square Art Walk had lingered in his mind more than he'd expected. Since then, they'd exchanged a few messages, short, thoughtful, and tonight, he wanted to listen not as a tech CEO but as someone who knew the power of words that change people. He still didn't know she was the writer behind the essay that had shifted his understanding of equity. But a part of him felt drawn to this woman who seemed to walk through fire with poise. The conference room buzzed with quiet conversation. Some attendees were from grassroots organizations. Others were city officials, startup founders, and a few curious students. Monica glanced at the large digital timer to her left. A nod from the event coordinator. It was time. She stepped up, adjusted the mic. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm, anchored. "I want to start by telling you a story. Not one with neat arcs or marketable buzzwords, but one about silence and about why breaking it matters." She shared fragments from her life growing up in Georgia, raised by a single mother who cleaned houses for families that wouldn't look her in the eye. The first time a college professor told her she was articulate for someone from a public high school. How even in rooms she was invited into, she often felt like a ghost, with skin too dark to be visible. And then she told them about the shift. About how she'd once written an anonymous essay, angry and raw, titled, "The Systems Aren't Broken. They Were Built That Way." She described how the act of writing it wasn't catharsis, it was survival, and how even though it went unnoticed for years, it had recently reminded her that our stories, even the quiet ones, ripple wider than we know. From the back row, Derek froze. Monica continued, her voice growing stronger, steadier. "I'm not here to tell you that fixing broken systems is easy. I'm here to tell you that building new ones, braver, fairer, more human, is worth the work. But we can't build what we can't name. And we can't name what we won't see." The crowd leaned in. Applause broke gently at first, then crescendoed into a standing ovation. Monica stepped back, heart pounding but sure. She felt the echo of her words land not just in the room, but inside herself. Afterward, people lined up to speak with her. Some thanked her, others asked to collaborate, and a few simply said, "You said what I couldn't." Monica accepted it all with gratitude, though her eyes kept flicking toward the back where Derek still sat, unmoving. Eventually, he rose and approached. She braced herself, unsure what he might say. "I didn't know," he said, his voice lower now, more reverent. "That essay, it stayed with me. It changed how I ran my company. It changed me." Monica looked at him for a long moment. "I wrote it when I thought no one would care." "I did," Derek replied. "And now, knowing it was you." She cut in gently. "It doesn't change what it meant. But maybe it changes what happens next." They walked out of the building together under a cloudy sky. A light mist fell soft and forgiving. Derek paused beside her rental car. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said. "It's nearby if you have a little time." She hesitated, but nodded. "Okay." A few minutes later, they arrived at a modest warehouse tucked in a quiet corner of Belltown. Inside, the space had been transformed. Solar panels, repurposed tech, and workstations filled the room. A sign near the entrance read, "Project Ember Clean Power Community First." "It's a pilot," Derek explained. "A non-profit initiative. We're training formerly incarcerated people to install solar systems in underserved neighborhoods. It's funded separately from my company. Quiet work. But it's been growing." Monica's eyes widened. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because I wasn't sure if it was enough," he said. "But hearing you speak reminded me why I started it." She walked slowly through the space, her hand brushing a circuit diagram pinned on a corkboard. The air smelled faintly of solder and hope. "This," she said, turning back to him. "This is what real allyship looks like." He didn't speak. He just looked at her with a softness that felt unguarded. Later that evening, Monica sat by her apartment window with her journal open. Rain tapped lightly against the glass. She wrote, "Some truths need no signature to leave a mark. But sometimes the person who finds your words can return them to you in ways you never imagined." She looked out at the street below. Somewhere in that city, she had just changed the direction of someone's future. And maybe, just maybe, her own. A cool spring breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass through the grounds of the East Side Community Center, where string lights twinkled above rows of folding chairs and long picnic tables draped in gingham cloth. The annual Voices Forward Festival was in full swing, a local celebration of art culture and civic progress in Seattle's historically underserved Rainier Valley. Food trucks lined the curb, Ethiopian injera Korean fusion tacos, and deep-dish pizza. Kids darted between booths, their laughter echoing like music against the center's brick walls. It was a mosaic of voices, flavors, and colors, and in the center of it all stood Monica Reed, radiant in a sunflower yellow dress, her smile wide, but quietly humbled. She wasn't the keynote speaker today. That role belonged to a local teen poet laureate. But Monica's presence by design was powerful in its restraint. She walked among the crowd, embracing elders, laughing with toddlers, her hand resting lightly on the arm of Councilwoman Lee, with whom she'd been quietly collaborating on a citywide equity initiative. Her name no longer needed introduction, and yet she was careful not to let her platform become a pedestal. Nearby, Derek Langston chatted with a group of young black engineers from his clean energy pilot. He wore jeans and a soft chambray shirt, his usual tech world armor shed in favor of approachability. But his gaze flicked often toward Monica, watching her move like a current through the crowd, graceful, grounded, unforgettable. They hadn't labeled what they were. Since the conference, they'd shared long conversations over late-night tea and early walks along Alki Beach. They'd spoken little of love, but everything they did seemed to say it anyway. And on this particular day, Derek had something quietly monumental in his pocket, a small velvet box, heavy not with diamonds, but with intention. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the MC called for attention. It was time for the community awards, simple acknowledgments, given to those who had impacted the neighborhood in quiet, tangible ways. Names were read. Applause rippled. Then came a pause. "There's one more," the MC said. "This next honoree doesn't just advocate for change, she embodies it. Her work, both seen and unseen, has shifted policy, empowered youth, and reminded us what true leadership looks like." Monica's brows furrowed in surprise as her name was called. The applause roared. She walked to the stage slowly, her sandals clicking softly on the platform. As she accepted the plaque, her hands trembled slightly, not with nerves, but with the gravity of being truly seen. "I don't do this alone," she said, her voice carrying over the quiet crowd. "I stand on the shoulders of my mother, who cleaned houses with cracked hands and an unbroken spirit. I walk beside neighbors, organizers, and elders who've taught me that justice is not an event, it's a habit. And I look to the next generation, who remind me daily to stay teachable, stay fierce, and stay kind." The crowd rose again, clapping. But as Monica stepped down, something shifted. Derek moved forward, not with urgency, but with quiet resolve. The crowd sensed it before it unfolded. He took her hand. "For years," he said, his voice warm, steady, "I thought building systems was enough. Then I realized they're nothing without people who know how to care for them. Monica, you changed how I see the world and how I want to build it." He dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled. A child squealed with delight somewhere in the back. From his pocket, he produced the box. Inside was a simple ring platinum, no gemstone, just a delicate inscription etched along the inner band. "You saw me. I see you. Not to make you a symbol," he said, "but to walk with you as Monica. As a partner, a student, a witness to the kind of world you already live like we deserve." Tears welled in Monica's eyes, not because she hadn't expected this, but because she had never needed it. And that made it all the more powerful. She bent to his level, cupped his face gently. "Yes," she whispered, "but only if you promise to keep learning." "I do," he whispered back, slipping the ring on her finger. The crowd erupted, not with spectacle but with joy, the kind that blooms quietly in a shared breath of recognition. The jazz band resumed softly in the background. People returned to their food, their dancing, their living. Later that night, under the soft light of a lamppost, Monica sat on a bench beside her mother's old friend, Ms. Yvette, who had brought Monica her first library card, and always said, "Reading gives us receipts for how far we've come." "You did it," Ms. Yvette said softly. Monica leaned back, watching lanterns float skyward. "We did it," she replied. In that moment, she felt the weight of every story that had ever tried to crush her, every system that once told her she didn't belong, and how wrong they had all been. She wasn't just accepted now. She was home. There was a quiet kind of magic in that final spring evening, the kind you don't always notice until years later. The warm glow of string lights, the hush that fell as Monica accepted her award, and the simple, profound stillness when Derek knelt and asked not to rescue her, but to walk beside her. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a soft, radiant closing of a circle long overdue. What Monica's journey taught us wasn't loud or flashy, it was steady. She didn't shout to be heard. She didn't tear down to rise. Instead, she moved through a world that tried to overlook her and showed through talent, integrity, and unwavering grace that the way forward isn't through dominance, but through dignity. Being a woman of color in America too often means having to prove your worth twice over. But Monica reminded us the measure of a person isn't in the title they carry or the name on their badge. It's in how they love, lead, and live when no one's watching. In a world still wrestling with the weight of old prejudice, her story is a living answer to the question, what if we chose to see beyond assumption? What if we paused long enough to understand? Sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones already building what's next, and sometimes the most powerful kind of justice is quiet, steady, and rooted in love. Like a lamp left glowing in a window, one person's calm, consistent light can guide others home even through storms. Monica didn't demand the spotlight. She became it by refusing to let the darkness define her. So as you sit with this story, maybe sipping tea, maybe watching the sun slip behind your own neighborhood, take a moment. Look around you. Who are the quiet lights in your life? The ones breaking barriers, not with noise, but with care. And if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of someone who keeps showing up even when the world looks away, consider sharing it. Because stories like Monica's aren't just meant to be told. They're meant to be passed on like a lantern hand to hand.